it sounds like it's really easy to talk at someone. I mean, I think we can all relate to that and not listening enough. How can we be more mindful when it comes to um, having conversations in this way to make our relationships at work and at home more successful?
It's very simple. It is ultimately about, and I don't want to use the word training because that sounds a bit directive, but it is about giving people an experience to reflect on two things. One, on what actually happens when people talk. I think we forget how complicated an interaction between human beings is and how many things happen within you, within me, and between us. And by making people more aware of what happens, immediately you start to see improvements. Add to that, clearly there are some skills which are part of how humans talk to each other. It's about being present, it's about knowing yourself, it's about developing deeper listening skills, it's about developing the ability to say things in a way that is constructive rather than destructive. So a combination of raising self-awareness and some upskilling is the way to go. And most of us can make quite significant improvements quite quickly in the way we talk with people. And it isn't just about work, it's how you talk to your spouse at home, how you talk to your children. It's all the same thing. It all depends on our ability to do this well. And the argument we always make is, we all do it, but we can all do it a bit better. And it starts by being mindful, and it starts by accepting that there's some things you can learn and be reminded of. So you can make dramatic improvements.
Now, in your experience, in your opinion, how long does it take for someone to make this shift?
Not that long. And I think it's like all things. Learning starts when people accept they can be better. If you don't accept that, learning can take a long time. It can take forever and maybe never happen. But if you get people to the point where they think, actually, do you know what? I think I could be a bit better at this. You can make improvements in days. You can give people awareness and some skills to start practicing immediately. The challenge always, of course, is not falling back into bad habits. And that, in a work setting, takes you back to the role of leadership and creating an environment where great conversations are recognized and valued so that it isn't just a one-off workshop or whatever it is that people go through. But to answer your question, you can make improvements very, very, very quickly. And that's the great thing about this. You can.
Now, can you tell me about some of the training and skills that you give through your workshop to help get people on the right track when it comes to having good conversations?
We work on three levels. So we work with teams, and teams, when they talk, lots of stuff plays out, and very few teams pay attention to the quality of their conversations. So we work with typically leadership teams using a diagnostic tool to say, when you talk as a team, this is what happens, let's talk about that. We work with individual managers around what we call something called the 5 skills of great conversations. So these are workshops, half day, full days, longer sometimes, which expose people to, if you like, the theory and science behind what happens when we talk, and breaks that down into these 5 super skills, which we then get people to play with and become more proficient at. And then thirdly, you can build the principles of conversation into an organization and into how an organization talks. So you can create large group meetings where people authentically talk and have conversations. You can set up online virtual conversations. So you can play on the bigger stage. But I think the key is to hit it at the team level, the individual, and the organization. So we try and impact all 3 of those.
Now, what kind of feedback have you had from people who have taken part in the training or the workshops? Have they seen a dramatic difference in the way they handle?
I think 2 things. I think firstly, what people say is, I didn't know this much went on when we talked, and I haven't really. The first, actually, overwhelming reaction is I'd never thought about this. I'd never really thought about what happens when I talk to people. So the overwhelming reaction is, wow, that's interesting. The second thing is, it's great that there are very practical things I can do to improve how I talk with people. And the third thing I think they say is, this isn't just about work. This is about life. This is about me and how I talk with people. So almost everyone says, I can talk to my kids differently, or my husband, or my wife. So I think it's an enlightening thing for many people. Similarly for teams, if you hold up the mirror to a team and say, this is what happens when you talk, it's very liberating. It's very rewarding for people to start naming things which they've kind of always known happen, but haven't often actively reflected on. So, and again, once you raise that awareness, you can make quick improvements. So I think it's a sense of enlightenment is probably the most overwhelming thing, to say, I didn't know all this stuff. It's interesting, and I can do it better. So it's great to see people do that. It's really rewarding.
Well, your company is London-based. We're here in Cape Town. How do we benefit from all of the services that you offer if we're sitting in South Africa and you're all the way in London?
Okay, in South Africa, well, the way we're doing it here, obviously, we're here at the moment to talk to people and sort of talk about the topic and generate some awareness around it. But we partner here clearly with an organisation called In Context. So we're trying to have, who are based in Cape Town, a consulting firm, and we're trying to create an on-the-ground presence so that we're not some remote bunch of people sitting in London sending stuff across. This works face-to-face, and we obviously want to practice what we preach, which is if we're going to get people to reflect on conversations, we want to be there, and we need people on the ground to help do that. So that's explicitly why we don't want to do just the flying in and out thing. We want to have boots on the ground, for want of a better word. And we have a great partner here who's going to help us to do that. But equally, we want to be part of that because we think it's exciting. And there's lots we can learn here about how conversations work, different cultures, different environments. All will have their own challenges. You've got your own history, you've got your own challenges currently for the country. And they all impact how people talk, how leaders lead, how organizations work. So all of that, I mean, no conversation happens without a context. It doesn't happen in isolation, it happens in a setting. So therefore, us understanding the setting is important, and therefore having local partners to work with is imperative. And we couldn't do it without that, because we'd be bringing London-type things to a different country where they may not necessarily land the same way. We're very aware of that. And we have similar arrangements in the States and in other countries where we work with folk on the ground. So that's how we'd like to do it.
Great. Now, if someone wants to start being more mindful about their conversations at home, what tips would you give them?
I would say, firstly, assume on any conversation you have that you haven't created shared meaning, that you haven't actually got to the same point as quickly as you have. So I would always question yourself. I've had a conversation with someone, do we actually see the world the same way? 9 times out of 10, it'll be no. Secondly, I would say, listen. We do far too little listening, far too much talking. The essence of great dialogue is about understanding the perspectives of others and seeking to get to that. We don't do enough of that. We do far too much trying to persuade or convince people that what we have to say is very important. I often challenge myself and say, am I really, really listening to what's being said to me? And very often the honest answer would be, no, I'm probably not. I'm not there. I'm thinking about my next answer, or my point of view, or I'm even distracted by other things. So I would say, be mindful that just because you've had a conversation, you're not on the same page. And the single biggest thing you can do is to spend a lot more time on deep listening and really trying to understand what someone else is trying to say to you. And especially in family settings with kids, kids don't use language often that it clearly expresses what they think, really feel. It's coded in different words. So really listening to what a kid or a partner says is a hugely valuable investment in relationship building generally, in particular in families. So that's what I'd say to that. It's all very human stuff. So
that's okay, you can continue.
No, I was going to say at the heart of all this, and I think this is interesting in a modern world, which is increasingly about technology and you're connecting remotely. I think we forget that we're kind of humans still, and this is what humans are designed to do. But it takes becoming a little bit more aware of it and reminding ourselves that is what we should do, and we can do it better. So back to basics.
Thanks, Dick.
My pleasure.